Hello, welcome back to my channel. Yes, it's that time of the week again where I sit in front of a camera and talk to you about Orphan Black because I have no social life, so you know, why not talk to you about Orphan Black? No, I'm not wearing a scarf. When I look in this camera it looks like my neck has been cut in half or something. It's this bodysuit, it's very nice. It's one of those, it's got funny half you've got sleeves, half you've not got sleeves. Yeah. Also, Funko Pops are nicely arranged for this episode. And I've discovered my Orphan Black obsession has slightly hit a new point because I had a hospital appointment on Friday. Yes, Friday, the day the episode came out. But I picked up something because they have a travel agents there. Because like if you're sick, you might want to go on a nice holiday. And I picked up something. It's just a brochure for Canada. Like, and you can say I know nothing about Canada except Orphan Black was filmed there. I used to have a friend who is from Canada, so my obsession with Canada and Orphan Black is justified. Yeah, I'm not sure if I like this. It's sort of, it looks nicer on, like not on camera. It just sort of makes my face look rounder than it already is. I'm not sure. Yeah. So long story short, my obsession with Canada and Orphan Black has hit all new ranges. Anybody from Canada, please comment below because I would like to go to Canada. I've never been abroad in my life. Never, ever, never been on a plane. Been on a boat, like a short boat, but I'm not a big fan of boats, Titanic and all, and I'm not a fan of things that move. Just, you know, it screws me for my whole life because everything moves. But I would like to go to Canada. I would like to go to Canada. I think it looks quite nice. Like, I've liked Australia and New Zealand. Australia's a bit far for me though, and it's quite hot, whereas I like New Zealand for the reason of it's quite like the climate here in the UK, if that makes sense. It's not just like one big heat wave. That's kind of, and I know Canada has snow, and when I've looked at this brochure with like the temperatures, it doesn't seem that hot. Like, it's not hot a good percentage of the time. So it's hot like from June to a certain point, whereas like in America it's hot all the time pretty much. Like, from what I've seen, like from California it's always sunny, from Florida, except for New York. I know New York has like the winters are quite cold. I do want to go to New York. That is one of my bucket lists. Also, another bucket list of mine, you know, is if anybody noticed this from Orphan Black. Although I think I would die. I legitimately think I would die. It's like one of those dreams, you know, where you just sort of think, I'd love someone from Orphan Black to sort of see this and be like, she is crazy. She loves Orphan Black too much. Like, she loves Orphan Black. That would be a compliment. But then I'd also be like, oh my god, I'd be too worried to do anything ever again. I mean, that's like a, you know, like one of those dreams. Not that I think it would happen, but you know what I mean. You can hope, and you can dream. Maybe New Zealand, New York, and Hawaii. Yeah, I'm weird. I want to go to Hawaii. I watched the movie The Descendants with Shailene Woodley and I really liked Hawaii. And this is how I find most of my things. I watch movies and I watch TV and I think, yeah, I'd like to go there. That looks quite nice. So I also picked up a Hawaii brochure. I like looking for the brochures and thinking, oh, I'll go there one day. Bear in mind, I've never been on a plane. Only place I really have been that you could class as a country maybe is Wales. I've been to pretty much every part of Wales. But yeah, also because I have hydrocephalus and I know some people with hydrocephalus, and like some of my friends that I know, they have not similar conditions, but they like have conditions in the brain as well. And I know people can't fly because of that. And nobody's ever said I can't fly. Nobody's ever been like you can fly. It's more of a get up in the air and we'll see. So I've never been quite sure, and because my head, it's not just the hydrocephalus that I've had wrong with my head, so I don't know how well my head would cope with the pressure of being up in the air. And also I don't like, it's like with trains, I have anxiety, and part of it is I don't like the idea of, I watched a plane documentary yesterday and they had loads of people sort of go on this plane with like EasyJet, get them over that fear. And I think my fear is it's part claustrophobia. I'm not that claustrophobic in general, but like I won't go on the underground because I don't like the idea of being in the ground in a confined space, if that makes sense. But and also it's also because they were saying that some of the people's fears are being in a confined space, and some are, they are so many thousands of feet up in the air. The idea of being out of control, and that's also the other half of my fear. On like trains and stuff and buses, I am out of control. It's almost like an irrational fear, because it's not like I'm afraid of heights either. Although my mum is afraid of heights, and she doesn't mind flying, so it's weird. I think part of the being out of control thing is having to trust other people, and I'm not very trusting of other people who aren't in my circle, if that makes sense. But yeah, so today we're here talking about Orphan Black again. Yeah, I mean, seriously, this season has been just so good, and like, I don't know what I'm gonna do when it's over. Like, and I'll just have to be waiting for season 5, like, but it'll be worth the wait. And I know I read articles that say they only have plans to take it to season 5, and as much as I love Orphan Black, I can understand that. I don't want it to be like this, because Orphan Black is so good and it's sort of quite consistently good. I don't want it to suddenly go downhill. I'd rather it cut off at a point and be like, you know, we'd rather leave you in suspense, and like a few what ifs, like you could make your own sort of ending, like if the ending isn't succinct enough. But I don't want it to be like one of those things that just runs and runs and runs, and you just sort of think you're losing sort of the spark it had. So I'd rather that than it just keep running. This episode of Orphan Black, get me notes up. Orphan Black news. This is Orphan Black news. Like, I am definitely going to be cosplaying as Cosima and Sarah at Comic Con. How excited. I got the perfect top for Sarah. I found it on New Look. Yes, I love New Look. You wouldn't believe it. But it's like, you know, the episode where Peaches was in. I also love those songs, and I found them and they're on my Spotify. I'm so happy now. That top she wore, wait till I show you it. I'm so impressed with it. Like, look at that. Look at that. The episode. I know we are ready. So this is my review of Orphan Black episode 9, The Mitigation of Competition. This episode, I really loved it. It was just so good. Start off with Rachel, and she's having one of her sort of glitchy, like the eye glitching things, and we see this kind of forest. We see that man again. Who is that man? Can I just say? And they're sort of exploring the islandy sort of foresty setting that they're in. It seems her and Ira have been let out from the island of Dr. Moreau, and she's telling Ira they seem to, this eye glitching thing, they seem to be on an island, and I'm a bit like, is that the same island that Cosima is on? I'm a bit like, can't I just give Cosima a nice sort of ending for the season, you know? Yeah, give her a cure and then plunge her back into danger. And then we see Evie, who is talking to a reporter because it seems she's now got the approval for the gene therapy, and she's having a press conference and how it can help. Speaking of like genetics and things, did anybody watch the Panorama thing? It was on BBC One. I'm sure it's on BBC iPlayer, about like the new wave of science, and it was all about gene editing. And all the while through, I was sat there thinking, wow, this is like an episode of Orphan Black. Have they been taking ideas from Orphan Black? And they were going on about the designer babies, and I was a bit like, this is delving into an episode of Orphan Black. And then they were talking about like it was a lot of sort of the ethics and the sort of the things they talk about on Orphan Black, like whether it's really ethical to rear a pig, human DNA in it to get a transplant organ, like things like that, and sort of saying how human will that pig then be, and is that ethical to have a transplant type farm, and like how ethical is it to have this editing thing that can change any part of the DNA. Oh, there's a fly here. A bit like what they talk about in Orphan Black, like saying, is that really ethical? Is that really the best way? How can you guarantee the science won't go too far, if that makes sense? So we see Evie, and she's talking about where she comes from, Tisdale, and she's going to be putting a new Brightborn place, so people from Tisdale will have jobs and it will help the economy. And in a strange way, I really like Evie because she's such a great villain, in the sense that you can see exactly where she's coming from, if that makes sense. Like, you can see her motivations behind things and sort of why she's doing things, but also you sort of think, how have you warped it to this degree? And that doctor who's lurking, like, I can't remember his name, but the doctor that examined Evie's shingles, I think it was last week. He's creepy. I think there is more to him than it seems, if that makes sense. And then we see a knock on the door, and it's Felix and Sarah, because they're in the hotel. And then he says to Ira, guess who believed it? A caster who favours flags. And I'm like, oh, Felix, you've got some great lines this episode. And then there's Ira being like, you must be Felix. And it's a bit like, yeah, that's Felix. And we see that Sarah, Ira, Felix and Rachel are going to team up. And it's a bit like, ooh, this is going to be a very fraught team. One that none of them fully trust each other. And then the greatest thing of all, Helena, she's back. I was just like, I think I almost squealed in joy because Helena was back. I was just like, oh, Helena, how I have missed you. And of course she's gone all Hunter Survivor on everyone. And then we go back to Sarah, Felix and Ira and Rachel, and their plan is they're going to take down Evie. And the greatest line of all, even better than Felix's opening line to Ira, is this line where he's like, Ira, you fertilised my sister's egg. Science you don't get to speak to. Felix, you are MVP of this episode, because you see them talking about how Evie's got approval for the implanted gene therapy, but it's a Trojan horse because it means they can edit the biology of the babies that people are paying them to help them conceive, changing the baby's DNA without consent. And then they're talking about how they're going to take down Evie, and they're saying that Evie created but with illegal human trials, and that 2 human carriers of the baby fled. They want Sarah to go find them. And then we see this clip. It's kind of like chilling because it's sort of like, it was very sort of not serious, but it was like, it's the kind of stuff that you just sort of think, if that was ever to be carried out, God forbid, you'd hope it would be illegal. Do you know what I mean? And we see Evie watching the clip. And we find out she's being blackmailed by someone. And then we see the cheek choppers. Yes, I got it right this week. I didn't say tree choppers. I said cheek choppers. I just knew they'd come back. Like, just when I thought they disappeared, they're literally in on the act. And then we go to Alison, who's waiting outside the jail for Donnie. Yeah. He's been released, and we see Alison kind of losing her faith almost. It's an interesting concept because it's sort of like I don't want to say nature versus nurture again, but it's science versus faith. When all this scientific evidence has been given to you, Sarah and Felix, and they're at Felix's loft, which I love. I love his loft, and they're talking about how what their next moves are. And so Felix goes to make sure Adele doesn't get in on the clone glove early, and then he says, because Sarah's like, all the sort of clones are running out and she's meant to be keeping them in, and Felix is like, well, at least she's still got Rachel. And we're like, I think that's the clone she'd least like in the inner circle. Like, I love you, and I'm like, me too, and I'm like, yes, my Thelma and Louise have returned. This is what I wanted. Back to Sarah, who's with Art, and they're tracking down these 2 carriers. Only they've arrived at this shelter, and one of the carriers has been murdered to make it look like a suicide. And Art goes to Sarah, you're my Beth Childs today. And then Helena calls Sarah, and I'm just sort of like, oh, I love Helena. And everyone wants to know where Dooku is. I want to know where Dooku is. What did they do with him? Look, last we saw, God was cleaning. They haven't buried him back onto the Hendrix's garage again, because I don't think there's enough space for that. Let's be fair. Hendrixes are in enough trouble as is. And then we see Trina, Neolution Trina, the one Beth met, coming out of the woman's shelter. Sarah pretends to be Beth again, being like, I'm in undercover, and she says that she spoke to Kendra and the other carrier, saying that they realised Brightborn is not what it seems, that it's a lot worse. And she mentions Trina's at a abandoned house. The cop, I don't know his name, he's a dirty cop. He rings Evie, he sort of has an idea that Art and Sarah are going to go find this Kendra. And I'm just like, there's nowhere. I get it. Neolution is crawling everywhere. But is no one in cahoots? Is everyone in cahoots with Neolution now? Everyone in the police station? Probably. Except for babies and got and Raj. Yeah, poor Raj. And then we see Alison and Donnie. They're under surveillance, 2 undercover cop cars. Be careful, they could be near Lucian, because they're all in coats now. And then we see them talking to Adele, and Adele's sort of like, you know, does Duco have a thing for you? Like, and then Alison's like, it's not Duco doing this. And it's almost a bit like, you weren't meant to say that, Alison. You weren't meant to imply that Duco is dead. Bye, Mrs. S. Like, just keep quiet. And Adele now starts questioning. And we go back to Evie, and we see Evie's thing in her mouth getting inspected. Yeah. Don't these people learn? Maybe you shouldn't have a maggot on your face. And then we go back to Ira and Rachel, and they're sort of discussing, can they trust Sarah? And Ira's like, you really don't like her. And then the gem of a line that comes from Rachel, she stuck a pencil in my brain. Yeah, she did. I can see a point there. I can see why you wouldn't trust her. And then we go back to Cosima on the island, and Charlotte. And she's like, Charlotte's going, you're the sick one, Cosima. And Cosima's like, you're the other sick one, Charlotte. And I'm like, bonding over sickness. And then we go back to Adele, and I sort of love her transition this episode to where she's slowly deciphering that something is going on, and then she's like, is Felix in the mob? And it's a bit like, no, Nia Lucian is the mob. And Adele's like, so I'm reading into this, you know? And Felix is like, well, you did just mix mood stabilizers with gin. It's all a bit like, and then Adele's like, that's brunch. And then who happens to walk in? Helena, in her hunter warrior gatherer outfit with the sort of animal pelt hat on her head. And Adele's face was like, there's another one. It's all a bit like, yeah, there's another one. There's about 3 more other ones. And then Felix is trying to explain to Helena how him and Adele are related, and he's like, different mother, same father. And Adele's like, oh, you must be Sarah's sister, you're triplet. And then Helena's like, yes, same mother, womb. I'm like, yeah. Adele is getting suspicious, and we see Helena slightly getting a bit miffed off at Adele, and it's all a bit like, don't piss her off. We all saw what she did to Pouchy when he threatened the babies. Donnie and Alison having sex, like, I don't know whether I could have lived without that, maybe? I don't know. It was quite funny though. And they then talk about going on holiday, and Donnie's like, the last time we went to Splash World, Oscar came back with foot and mouth disease. And Alison's like, can't you just work with me? And I'm like, that's what I'm always saying to people. Can't you just work with me? Like see my vision. And then we go back to Rachel, who is glitching again, and we see these people on the island in the foresty bit, and the swan. And I want to know, what is this place on the island? What is going on? Like, we're getting further into the sort of vision of it, but what is it? Not sure. And then we go back to Art and Sarah, who have found Kendra. The babies are a bit funny. And then we go back to Felix and Adele, and Adele's like, see, Felix neglected to tell me twice about Sarah's sisters. And then it's Helena versus Adele. It's all a bit like, and Adele then says to Helena, did you just step up to me, little triplet? And it's all a bit like, no, don't do that, Adele. No. And then Helena like going, and I'm just like, this is what I wanted from Helena. I miss Helena so much, like so much. And then Felix is like, can you leave for a bit, Helena? I need to talk to her. And he says to Felix says to Adele, you've got to leave. And I found this scene quite sort of poignant, because all this season Felix has been trying to find out that different part of him, true family, but in the end his loyalty to the sisters, his loyalty to Sarah and to his family, I guess, comes first. His family comes first. So it's almost like he's letting go. He's almost closing that chapter. Like he's realised who he is, and now he can move on, if that makes sense. And then he's like, to Adele, you're so unsullied by this. I don't want to be the one to ruin that. He doesn't want to be the one to tell her about Clone Club, because she is so unaware of it. And if that means them not having contact, then that's what he will do, because he's realised that part of him. he can move forward. He's choosing to let her go for her safety, just to keep her the way she is. And then we go back to Sarah and Art and Kendra, where Kendra is showing them the video of what they did to this baby, and it's actually quite shocking, and I found it quite interesting watching Sarah watch the video, because she has a daughter. She sort of, I guess she can sort of see how the barbaricness of it, like no one should be allowed to do that. It's almost like what I said about the panorama thing about them breeding pigs just to kill them, even though that's what people do, because then it's also just breeding them to, and especially if they have like human DNA in them and it could go to their brain, is that really ethical? These pigs might end up with thoughts and feelings and emotions and a sense of consciousness, to then kill them for their organs. I mean, is this really the better option? We find out why her baby's eyes are funny. Her baby named Jacob was born blind, and if they find them, they'll kill her baby just like they did with this one. And it's quite interesting, because I am visually impaired, so it's almost like they're trying that any baby with any defect is not deemed perfect and not deemed livable. So it's kind of like it kind of makes you sit and think. And then we go back to Cosima, and I like Cosima, and I was reading this article just about this episode, and it said that it's quite interesting to see Cosima, while she's fascinated with this science and things around her, she's also at the same time not appalled and not disgusted, but like she doesn't agree with it. It's sort of like a toss and turn for her, because it's this science that she loves, but does she agree with it and the way it's gone about? And then we see Susan being pressured into, like when she made Charlotte, she was being pressured by people, and Cosima's like, you know, what pressure? And I was sort of like, yeah, what pressure, Susan? And who by? And then we see Sarah on the phone with Rachel. Rachel sort of like, you know, blackmail her with her other son. Blackmail Kendra with her other son, being like, you know, if you don't come with us, we'll harm your son. And Sarah's like, not gonna do that. I'm not gonna do that. She has to go by her own free choice. What does Rachel do? She gets Ira to do it instead. And then we see Ira being like, there's a bit of a complication, and I'm a bit like, what is that complication, Ira? What are you going on about? And then we see the people entering the house, and Sarah and Art are sort of behind the fridge, hiding, prepared to attack. And we see one of the cheek choppers who bloody goes everywhere. And then Kendra goes to Ira in the car, and it's all a bit like, well, at least she's safe, somewhat safe. And I love how we see Sarah is infuriated by what she saw in the video, and sort of like, how can you do that? How can someone do that to someone else, be it a baby, an adult, a child, an elder? How can you do that? And then the cheek choppers, like, you know, if you put us in jail, we'll only get out the next day. I mean, by the sound of things, the police is riddled with the neos, I mean. And then Art is like, well, I'll be real interested to see who springs you. And I'm like, yes, Art, yes, we'll see who the dirty cops are now. And then the cops on we go back to the Hendrickses, and we see the cops on surveillance have gone away. But there's an ambulance outside, and it's all a bit like, oh, God. We all know what that ambulance signifies. And then we see cheek chopper number 2 with a knife up to Donnie's throat after he's went to go get flip-flops for his holiday. And Anderson's like, where are you, Donnie? And she goes down to the basement, and there they are. And I'm always thinking, oh, he's always Donnie. I mean, last episode he was getting nearly shanked with a toothbrush in his eye up to his brain. He would have done a Rachel. Now he's having a knife to his throat, like it. And then we go back to Rachel Duncan, and she is at Brightbourne. And I am fascinated because, again, with the trusting thing, Sarah doesn't know completely whether Rachel is on their side and whether she will turn. So it's quite interesting to see what Rachel is really up to, whether she can be swayed from just taking down Evie if, like, she was given a role at Brightbourne. Like, she can't get over when Evie embarrassed her and said Neolution would never put a clone in a position of high power. She's not gotten over that. And then we go back to Donnie and Helene and Ken. There's so many of them. Donnie and Alison. That's it. And the cheek chopper is going to put a first generation Gucci maggot bot in Alison's cheek. And it's all a bit like, no, we went through that with Sarah and Cosimo, and she's going to put one in her face. They were very emotional times, and he says he wants info on what Sarah did to Duco. Well, really, you shouldn't be asking what Sarah did to Duco. You should be more asking what Mrs. S did to Duco. And then we see Alison praying, and on the 10th one where she's sort of like, you know, expecting the maggot in her face, who barges into the doorway, saving them, Helena, Helena is here to protect them. Like, seriously, she's protecting the Hendrixes, protecting family, and she kills the cheek chopper. And when Alison's like, where did you come from? And Helena's like, Beavertown National Park. It was very peaceful. And then she goes to Donnie and she says, Donnie, you look like roast pig. And she sort of has a glimmer of a sort of smirk, and I'm just like, I just love Helena, she's great. And then we go to Sarah, who thinks she's being played by Rachel after them taking Kendra. And she goes to their hotel suite and sees Ira and is a bit like, what's she doing? She's playing